Genesis chapter 25, verse 21. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife, because she was barren, and the Lord was entreated of him. And Rebekah, his wife, conceived. But I should read it from verse 19. These are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Now we come to a new chapter in the book of Genesis. Abraham begat Isaac. And Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife. A little later it's going to tell us that after the birth of the twins, well, he was 60. So for 20 years, Isaac and Rebekah awaited the birth of their children. 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Padan Aram, the sister to Laban the Syrian. And Isaac entreated the Lord, probably for 20 years. And though it was a long wait, the Lord was entreated of him. The word entreated is given in our version twice. It's a beautiful word. God entreated by us. We could spend the whole evening exploring that one word. It is astonishing that God permits himself to be entreated. God who determines all things, God who is sovereign, yet is entreated by his people. These are wonderful mysteries and astonishing privileges. And Rebekah, his wife, conceived. And then verse 22, the children struggled together in the womb. Now, Isaac was 40 when he was married. He lived to be 180. He prayed for 20 years. He was a peaceful man. He made a very big recorded mistake, repeating the twice committed mistake of Abraham, and he was forgiven, and he was given a long, long period of great blessing and earthly prosperity and enrichment and peace. But he did have a fault, a spiritual fault, which is disclosed to us. The Bible is so open, even about the heroes of faith, and tells us so much. And if Isaac makes a grave mistake from which the Church of Christ has to learn over centuries and take heed of, then it's disclosed, even though broadly he was a most godly patriarch. And we're going to read about that. Well, you know, we're looking tonight at such a familiar narrative, and I intend to proceed through it simply. There are a number of important principles in this chapter. There is, of course, much on the subject of election, and in Paul's letter to the Romans in chapter 9, particularly verses 10 to 16, he uses this very passage as the basis of instruction on election. So you could major on the chapter from that point of view. But there are many other principles here. There is the whole problem of family favoritism, and not just family favoritism, favoritism generally, and being and lacking impartiality. One of Satan's oft-used wiles against churches is to divide them or to hurt them because some much admired and appreciated and highly regarded person falls, and the discipline of that person is not really possible because so many people support that person. What a tragedy when that happens in a church. And I've known over the years of churches split because people couldn't divide between the affection they felt towards someone and the bond they had with someone and the wrong that that person had done. And you find something very similar here in this chapter, a massive lesson on that in particular. But perhaps the greatest lesson of all is that a certain cable is kept running that comes all the way from chapter 3. And that is the contention between the church and the world, and the need for the church and the world to be separate. There's no greater disaster than a state church or an empire church. The separation of church and state, the sacred, separate and distinctiveness of the church of God's people. And we've seen it before, where the people think unity is vital, the unity of the race, unity of the family, and God separates them. And they come back together, and he separates them again. The same thing happens in this chapter. It's a lesson that repeats. It's a cable, or a thread, as you would call it today in the internet language, that runs through these chapters. And yet today, people are blind to it. In a season when the church is marrying the world all the time and adopting the worldly dress, music, methods, wholesale, people will not look at this obvious theme which dominates these chapters. And you read some modern works and modern commentaries, even from evangelicals, not a hint of the separation and distinctiveness of God's people, which is the great act of God in chapter after chapter. It's a tragedy. Well, we come and look at these verses. And verse 22, the children struggled together. There was a great jostling and a fight going. This is remarkable. This can't be explained in wholly natural terms. This was excessive and extraordinary. And of course, Rebekah is deeply concerned. If so be, why am I thus? It's happening all the time, not just once or twice. And she went to inquire of the Lord. They're godly people. Although she's going to commit a great sin, they are godly people. Godly people can sin and fall. This is part of the lesson. She went to inquire of the Lord. Great motto for all of us. First thing we should do. And the Lord spoke to her in a way we're not privileged to have today. He speaks today through his word. And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb. So she knew it would be twins, but the language is elevated. Not 2 people, not 2 boys, 2 nations are in thy womb. And 2 manner of people. There you are, 2 people distinct from each other, quite different, altogether different, shall be separated from thy bowels. The one people shall be stronger than the other people. That's Esau, who will give rise to Edom. They will be far stronger than Jacob and Israel. Not in the long term, of course. By the time David, the great type of Christ, comes to the throne, then Israel is stronger than Edom. Always a great trouble. Edom always hostile, always an enemy. Ultimately, Israel will prevail, but the one people should be stronger. Esau was a stronger man. Esau was a stronger character, well, not character, but personality. Esau is described as a cunning hunter, a man of great skill and power and courage, an adventurer. He was probably, to a degree, a good-natured person. He wasn't a spiritual man. He wasn't a worshipper. He didn't value spiritual things. But his father admired him. His father was a quiet man, like son Jacob. And he admired the strident, powerful, strong Esau. Admired him very much. He was going to be the head of the family in Esau's eyes. Now Esau knew that God had spoken to Rebekah and said, "The elder shall serve the younger." That meant several things. That in the long term and in their future progeny, the nations that would come from them, the nation of God would be through Israel and ultimately Christ and the church, God's people. And the elder shall serve the younger, all the way to the day of judgment, when mysteriously we shall assist in the judgment of the world at the judgment throne of Christ. And the elder will be seen to serve the younger. Now, Isaac knew that. He knew that the seed royal was with Jacob, the younger, and the future was with Jacob. What was he doing? Was he thinking in his mind, no, I really love and admire Esau for his skills and his strength. I'm going to substitute him. No, it wasn't that. It was a compromise. I recognize that Jacob has the seed royal. He will be the ancestor of Messiah, the promised descendant, the one through whom all the nations of the world will be blessed. But Isaac will be CEO of the family. He will run the estates. He's the strident one. He will be the chief. We'll have church and world together. And Isaac will look after earthly affairs, and Jacob will look after spiritual affairs and family devotions. Of course, I'm speculating a certain amount to get the point across. Something like that was going on. And it's very interesting that when Jacob steals the blessing from Esau, obtaining it from Isaac rather, Isaac, thinking he's blessing Esau, not Jacob, doesn't give him the seed royal blessing. He only gives him the blessing of the headship of the family and prosperity and safety. He doesn't repeat the special words that through him shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. And Shiloh, Messiah, come. The full Abrahamic blessing passed to Isaac is not given to Jacob when Isaac thinks he's blessing Esau. So you see, it was a compromise. He tried to get both in. In a sense, you could say, though this is not the right language, that Isaac was the first ecumenist. We'll have everybody together, the world and the church. But he certainly was a kind of foreshadowing of what we're seeing today, the church and the world getting together. And we'll come back to that. Verse 24, when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. Well, you know the story. There was one, came out red, all over like an hairy garment, Esau. And after that came his brother. His hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. He was the supplanter. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. And the boys grew. And Esau was a very clever hunter, a man of the field. And Jacob was a plain or quiet man, dwelling in tents. So we could say so much about this and build on these statements, a picture of character, and I'm sure you can see the two. And Isaac loved Esau because he did eat of his venison, the fruit of his adventures. But Rebekah loved Jacob. She did love him very deeply, very dearly. Bear that in mind. It's significant as it goes on. And Jacob sod pottage. And Esau came from the field and was faint. I think probably very, very faint. Maybe these hunting exploits could go on for days. And Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage. And Jacob said, sell me this day thy birthright. And so often people think, what a low trick. What a cunning person. What a disgusting thing. To demand his birthright for a meal. Yes, but there's more to it than that. Jacob knew that Isaac was going to give to Esau what he thought was the seed royal blessing, which he didn't merit and it didn't apply to him, and the headship of the family, when he wasn't even interested in its devotional life and its spiritual aims and objectives. He held it in contempt and he had no time for it. Jacob was more likely mounting a demonstration. How can he move his father? So his idea more likely is that if he can demonstrate that Esau will throw away his privileges and his birthright so lightly, it will get across to the father how unworthy he is of this esteem and admiration and promise. It's quite a smart thing to do, really. And Esau says, I'm at the point to die. That's probably not wholly true. It's probably a big exaggeration. Who knows? What profit shall this birthright do to me? But we're told later on that thus Esau despised his birthright. He had no time for the religion of his father, for the faith and their history, and all that they lived so close to. Had no time for these things and no interest. Jacob said, verse 33, swear to me this day, and he swore to him. An oath, a solemn oath. What did he say? May I suggest to you that the oath, but this is a very free paraphrase, went something like this. I swear by whatever he swore by, I am an unbeliever. It was an oath. He was sure of it. and certain of it. The demonstration was appropriate. He should never have the birthright blessing. Isaac was seriously at fault, but he wouldn't see that, and he didn't see it. Now I have to pass over for this week, chapter 26 for 27, and keep the narrative. We'll return another time. And it came to pass that when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, well, he had 43 years still to go, but he thought he was near to death. However, his eyes certainly were failing him. He called Esau in readiness to give him the birthright blessing. Well, he wouldn't give him quite that, but the blessing of the headship of the family. My son. And he said unto him, Behold, here am I. And he said, Behold, now I am old. I know not the day of my death. Now therefore take, I pray thee, thy weapons, quiver, bow, and go out and take me some venison, savoury meat, before I die. He thought it was imminent, had a long way to go yet. And Rebekah heard, verse 5, when Isaac spoke to Esau his son. Oh, say some people, she's eavesdropping. She's not a nice person at all. Oh, friends, Isaac is quite old and he can't see. She nursemaids him. She affectionately watches over him. What's he going to do? Do I need to sort of head this off or give some assistance or make sure someone's there to help? Of course she's looking after him. She's not eavesdropping. And Rebekah heard when he spoke to Esau. And here's her sin. Verse 6, she spoke to Jacob her son. I heard your father speak with Esau. Bring me venison and so on, that I may bless you before I die. So obey my voice, go to the flock, fetch 2 good kids of the goats and so on. Bring it to my father. She's got it all planned. Her cause is right. Her method is wrong. To try to avert this disaster is a noble aim, but the way she went about it was dishonest. It was a lie. There's going to be a warning developing here for us. How often do you do the right thing in the wrong way? How often have we as parents done the right thing in the wrong way? How careful we have to be in our speech and our conduct. Verse 11, Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, Behold, Esau, my brother, is a hairy man. I am a smooth man. My father will feel me. Why will he feel him? Oh, Isaac and Jacob have had run-ins before and contentions before, and Jacob has perhaps behaved in an underhand way, and his father would be suspicious of him. It doesn't look very 100% happy household in that respect. I shall seem to him as a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon me, not a blessing. But his mother, upon me be thy curse, my son. How she would affect that, I don't know, but that's a noble thing, really, isn't it? She's ready to take the blame if it goes wrong, but she's still doing the wrong thing. That can happen in Christian work. I remember a conversation I had with somebody, and he was telling me about a friend of his who was into some very worldly and unsavory things in the interests of Christian service. And I gently tried to point out this wasn't the right thing to do. And the reply came, but you can't criticize this. He works so hard. Well, here was somebody in Christian service and working for the Lord, but he was doing things in a very worldly way. But we'll excuse it because he works so hard. Well, we can't excuse Rebekah because although it was a noble aim she had, and although she was ready to take the blame, she shouldn't have been doing it. We always have to keep our mind on the point, for ourselves too. And Jacob went and fetched, verse 14, and his mother made savoury meat. And Rebekah took goodly raiment of her eldest son Esau, put them upon Jacob, the skins of the kids of the goats upon his hands, and upon the smooth of his neck, and gave the meat and so on into his hand. And he came unto his father and said, My father. And he said, Here am I. Who art thou, my son? And Jacob said unto his father, Is the straight lie from Jacob? I am Esau, thy firstborn. I have done according as thou badest me. Arise, I pray thee, and so on. And Isaac is suspicious, verse 20. How come it's all done so quickly? And then he feels, verse 21. And there's that magnificent statement in verse 22. And Jacob went near unto Isaac his father, and he felt him and said, The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And that's a verse that used to be quoted years and years and years ago, a very great deal, and you just don't hear it quoted these days. But when the people of God were alive to the problem of compromise, it was used a good deal. If somebody on the right track, out of the right motives, was setting out to do something which was right, but decided to do it in the wrong way, you would get this phrase used. I can imagine it today. Here's a church. The pastor is reformed. He gets into the pulpit. He preaches truth. Then the singing starts, perhaps even the dancing, and the drums beat away, and all the percussion and the noise and everything. Well, you listen to the words of so much contemporary Christian worship. They are pious. Oh, they may be very shallow. There may be little or no repentance in them. There may be little or no reflection of the greatness and holiness of God. They may be very short on many things, very shallow theologically, very repetitive and all the rest of it, but we'll give it, so far they are pious. The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands, the whole surroundings, the music, the actions, the dress, the way it's done, is Esau's. That's the evangelical churches, by and large, today. The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau, the church and the world together. However, Isaac was fooled. Art thou my very son, Esau? And he said, I am. Bring it near to me, I will eat of my son's venison, and so on. And he did. Verse 26, his father Isaac said unto him, Come near now, and kiss me, my son. And he did. And there's the blessing. halfway through verse 27, see, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field which the Lord hath blessed. Therefore God give thee of the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve thee and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be every one that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee. But there's no seed royal blessing. And there's no all the families of the earth should be blessed. He's only half blessing the one who he thinks is his son Esau. The return of Esau, verse 30. Who art thou, verse 32, I am thy son, thy firstborn. He lays his claim. Esau, the firstborn. That was natural law. And Isaac trembled very exceedingly. The blessing had gone out. It wasn't the seed royal blessing, but it was half the blessing. The headship of the family and all its... And now he trembled. He'd blessed the wrong one. He'd been deceived. That would make him angry. What would make him tremble was the sovereignty of God had overruled, and what he knew in his inner heart he should have done, he'd been made to do, and he was out of step with the Lord, and he was under fear of the judgment of God, and he abused his privilege and made up his own mind and let his own desires and likings guide him and judge him. So he trembles. And when Esau heard, verse 34, that Jacob had been blessed, he cried with a great and exceeding bitter cry, and said unto his father, Bless me, even me also, O my father. But it couldn't be done. Verse 37, Isaac answered and said unto Esau, Behold, I have made him thy Lord. He meant it to be the other way round. And all his brethren have I given to him for servants, and with corn and wine have I sustained him. What shall I do now unto thee, my son? And Esau said unto his father, Hast thou but one blessing, my father? Esau lifted up his voice and wept. But all he gets is an earthly blessing. Verse 39. And a difficult blessing. Verse 40. I won't read them all out, but come to verse 41. And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing. And Esau said in his heart, The days of mourning for my father are at hand. Not yet, but he thought so. Then will I slay my brother Jacob. These words of Esau, her elder son, were told to Rebekah. She called Jacob. He was sent away to Laban, to Haran. They accomplished what they set out to accomplish. The blessing went the right way. And Rebekah was to be very blessed in her life because they had another 40 years plus of great prosperity and happiness in their lives and union with God and blessing, both Isaac and Rebekah. But they were disciplined for their sin. How Rebekah loved Jacob. Now he had to go on the run under fear of being slain by Esau. Rebekah never saw her favourite son again, nor his. Bear in mind that both Esau and Jacob were 77 years of age when all this happened. And Jacob goes out, never to be seen again by Rebekah. And as for Jacob himself, how was he disciplined for his deception? He was deceived. He served 20 years in the household of Laban. He was twice cruelly deceived by Laban. God disciplines his own. I turn over to Hebrews chapter 12. Dear friends, this won't take a moment. First of all, I'm going to read from verse 5 of Hebrews 12. Ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not now thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. For whom the Lord loveth he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. If ye endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. But if ye be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, all sons and daughters, then are ye bastards, and not sons. I see a man who seems to be a reasonably sound preacher, but he aids and abets and encourages everything that's worldly and wrong, and he lives out a happy life, and nothing ever seems to go wrong for him. I really begin to wonder if he's a child of God. Because when we're children of God and we sin, there is a discipline, and we know it. And that's something we won't lose sight of. God in his love, he gave Isaac and Rebekah great prosperity, but she had to pay a price for her sin alongside that, the missing of her son. He gave Jacob great privileges and blessings and experiences. He saved him at Peniel. He walked with him, comforted him, protected him, helped him, brought him all the way through to victory. But there was a heavy price to pay for a very grave sin. We bear that in mind. The Lord does, in love, discipline his people. But I turn also to verse 15, looking diligently. And this is about, as we move to conclusion, this is about Esau's ill-fated attempt at repentance. Looking diligently lest any man fail of the grace of God. That's Esau. He had great grace extended to him. His heart was hardened. Lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person, translating an interesting term, a walker of thresholds, or one who is a threshold, who is walked over. It's been said, Esau's life was an open door. There was no holy of holies in it. Every temptation that came in through the door was given hospitality. If he was starving, hungry, he'd sell his birthright for lentil porridge. Every impulse, everything he gave way to. A profane person, no reserve, no holy of holies, no check on temptation, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright. For you know how that afterward, when he would have inherited the blessing, he was rejected. For he found no place of repentance, though he sought it carefully with tears. Did he seek a place of repentance? Diligently and anxiously and painfully, with tears? No. What he sought was the repentance of Isaac. What he sought was for Isaac to change his mind. You could read it with some degree of accuracy a different way. He found no place of repentance, though he sought it, meaning the earthly inheritance, carefully with tears. He didn't want forgiveness. He didn't want the Lord. He didn't want pardon and restoration. He wanted the inheritance. That's what he was seeking carefully, diligently, tearfully. That's what he wanted. He couldn't have it. He'd rejected it all. He despised his birthright. But through it all, God once again separated the church and the world. The two boys, old boys in their 70s, whom Isaac would join together, God thrust apart. And the lesson is repeated. The Church of Jesus Christ is distinct from the world.